What would you do if a ringing burner phone in a freezing alley connected you to the most dangerous man in Chicago? At 2 a.m., a struggling waitress answered a call to save a lost child, completely unaware she had just bound her fate to a ruthless mafia boss. The brutal Chicago wind howled off Lake Michigan, rattling the grease-stained windows of Manny's late-night diner. It was the kind of cold that seeped into your bones and stayed there. For 23-year-old Chloe Jenkins, the cold was just another thing to ignore. She was 6 hours into a double shift, her feet throbbing inside worn-out sneakers, her mind occupied by the crippling, past-due notices from Rush University Medical Center. Her younger sister, Lily, needed another round of immunosuppressants by Friday, and Chloe was exactly $800 short. At 1:45 a.m., the diner was practically empty, save for a drunk sleeping in a corner booth and the faint hum of the neon sign buzzing outside. Chloe grabbed the heavy black trash bags from the kitchen, shoving the back door open with her hip. The alley was pitch black, stinking of stale beer and freezing slush. She tossed the bags into the rusted dumpster, brushing the grime off her apron, when she heard it. A sharp, terrified intake of breath. Chloe froze. The alley was notorious for drug deals and muggings, especially this close to the CTA Red Line station. She grabbed a rusted metal pipe, leaning against the brick wall, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice surprisingly steady. "I have a weapon. I'm not playing around." A small shadow detached itself from the space behind the dumpster. Chloe lowered the pipe, the breath catching in her throat. It wasn't a mugger. It was a little boy, no older than 6. He was shivering violently, his dark hair plastered to his forehead with freezing rain. He wore a designer wool coat that was torn at the shoulder, revealing a white button-down shirt stained with mud and what looked terrifyingly like blood. But what caught Chloe's attention was the object clutched in his trembling, pale hands. A cheap, plastic, prepaid Nokia phone. "Hey," Chloe whispered, dropping to her knees despite the freezing slush seeping into her jeans. "Hey, sweetie, it's okay. You're freezing. Where are your parents?" The boy just stared at her with wide, terrified amber eyes. He shook his head frantically, backing away. "I'm not going to hurt you," Chloe said softly. She took off her faded denim jacket, moving slowly, and wrapped it around his small shoulders. The boy flinched, but the warmth seemed to break through his panic. He leaned into her slightly. "I'm Chloe. What's your name?" "Leo," he whispered, his teeth chattering. "Okay, Leo. Let's get you inside where it's warm. I can make you some hot cocoa, okay?" Before she could stand, the blinding headlights of a massive black SUV swept into the mouth of the alley. The tires crunched aggressively over the icy asphalt. 2 men stepped out. They weren't cops. They wore heavy tactical jackets, and the street lamp caught the distinct metallic glint of suppressed firearms hanging by their sides. Leo let out a muffled whimper and buried his face in Chloe's neck. Pure adrenaline flooded her veins. She shoved the boy into the narrow, dark gap between the brick wall and the dumpster, pressing her own body in front of him to shield him from view. She quickly pulled out a pack of cigarettes she kept for her breaks, shoved one in her mouth, and leaned against the freezing metal of the dumpster, feigning boredom. The men walked down the alley, their boots splashing in the puddles. "Hey, sweetheart," the taller one grunted. He had a scar running down his jaw. "You see a little kid run back here? Dark hair, fancy coat." Chloe dragged the unlit cigarette from her lips, giving him a flat, exhausted look. "Buddy, I've been out here for 10 minutes, avoiding my manager. The only thing I've seen is a rat the size of a chihuahua. If a kid came back here, he'd be halfway to the train station by now." The men exchanged a look. The scar-faced man stepped closer, his cold eyes scanning the shadows. Chloe forced herself not to breathe, praying Leo wouldn't make a sound. The man was inches away. She could smell cheap cologne and gunpowder. "Let's check the station," the second man barked. "If the boss finds out we lost the kid, we're both dead." They turned and jogged back to the SUV, peeling out of the alley in a spray of dirty snow. Chloe collapsed against the brick wall, gasping for air. She pulled a shaking Leo from the shadows and hurried him through the back door of the diner, locking the heavy deadbolt behind them. She sat him down in the manager's tiny back office, wrapping him in a thermal blanket she kept in her locker, and handed him a mug of hot water and cocoa powder. "You're safe now," she promised, brushing his wet hair back. "I need to call the police, Leo." "Those men—" "No!" Leo screamed, slapping the diner's landline phone out of her hand. The sudden violence in the small boy shocked her. "No police. Bad men have police." "Leo, I don't know what to do," Chloe pleaded, rubbing her temples. At exactly 2 a.m., the silence of the office was shattered by a harsh, electronic ringing. Chloe jumped. It was the cheap Nokia phone still clutched in Leo's hand. The boy stared at the glowing green screen as if it were a bomb. He handed it to Chloe, his lower lip trembling. Chloe swallowed hard and pressed the green button, bringing it to her ear. "Hello?" For a second, there was only the sound of heavy, controlled breathing. Then a voice spoke. It was deep, textured like gravel and smoke, and practically dripping with quiet, lethal authority. "Who is this?" "My name is Chloe." "Who am I speaking to?" "Where is my son?" The voice didn't rise, but the temperature in the room seemed to plummet. It was the voice of a man accustomed to giving orders that ended lives. "If there is a single scratch on him, I will find you, and I will take my time dismantling your life." "Listen to me, you arrogant jerk," Chloe snapped, her fear suddenly giving way to sheer exhaustion-fueled anger. "Your son is terrified, freezing and hiding from men with guns. Instead of threatening the only person who helped him, maybe you should come get him." A beat of dead silence followed. No one spoke to this man like that. "Give me an address," the voice finally commanded. Chloe gave him the address of the diner. "I'm 5 minutes away," he said. "Lock the doors. Trust no one." The line went dead. 5 minutes later, the diner was bathed in the red and blue glow of headlights. It wasn't the police. 3 heavily armored Lincoln Navigators boxed in the front entrance, blocking both lanes of Adams Street. 5 men in dark suits stepped out, fanning out across the perimeter with terrifying, militaristic precision. Chloe stood by the glass door, holding Leo's hand tightly. The front door of the lead navigator opened, and a man stepped out. The moment he locked eyes with Chloe through the glass, her breath hitched. He was devastatingly handsome, but in a harsh, predatory way. He looked to be in his early 30s, wearing a bespoke charcoal Brioni suit under a black cashmere overcoat. His jaw was clenched, his dark eyes burning with a chaotic mixture of panic and murderous rage. This was Vincent Moretti, the newly ascended head of the Moretti crime syndicate, a man who controlled the Chicago underworld with an iron fist. Chloe unlocked the door. "Papa!" Leo broke away from Chloe and ran. Vincent dropped to his knees right there on the dirty linoleum floor, catching the boy in his arms. The ruthless Mafia boss buried his face in his son's neck, visibly shaking as he checked the boy for injuries. For a fleeting second, Chloe saw a vulnerable, desperate father. Then, Vincent stood up, and the predator returned. He handed Leo to a hulking man behind him. "Put him in the armored car, Silvio. Warm it up." Vincent turned his gaze to Chloe. He took in her faded apron, her tired eyes, and the cheap name tag pinned to her chest. He reached into the inside pocket of his overcoat, pulling out a thick, banded stack of $100 bills. It had to be at least $20,000. He tossed it onto the diner counter. "For your trouble," Vincent said coldly, "and for your silence. You saw nothing tonight." Chloe stared at the money. It was enough to pay off her sister's medical debts. It was enough to fix her broken heater. It was a literal lifeline. But as she looked at Vincent's arrogant, dismissive expression, a surge of pride flared in her chest. She grabbed the stack of cash and shoved it hard against his chest. He caught it instinctively, his eyes narrowing in surprise. "I didn't shield a terrified kid in a freezing alley for a payout," Chloe said, her voice shaking but defiant. "I did it because it was the right thing to do. Take your blood money and get out of my diner." Vincent stared at her, genuinely taken aback. Women in his world didn't talk back. They certainly didn't reject 20 grand. A flicker of something resembling respect crossed his dark eyes. "Pride is an expensive luxury for a waitress, Chloe," he murmured, reading her name tag. He stepped uncomfortably close, towering over her. "I don't like owing favors, especially not to civilians. You don't owe me anything. Just keep your son safe." Vincent held her gaze for a long moment, then turned and walked out into the snow. The convoy vanished into the night, leaving Chloe alone in the quiet diner. She convinced herself the nightmare was over. She was dead wrong. 48 hours later, Chloe was walking up the creaky stairs to her cramped apartment in Logan Square, exhausted after another shift. As she turned the corner of her block, a deafening shockwave knocked her off her feet. The sound of shattering glass and tearing metal ripped through the neighborhood. Chloe gasped, pushing herself up from the concrete. She looked up and felt her stomach drop into an endless abyss. Her apartment building, specifically the 3rd floor where she lived, was engulfed in a massive ball of orange flames. Black smoke billowed into the afternoon sky. The Calabrese Syndicate, Vincent's bitter rivals who had orchestrated the hit on Leo, had accessed the city's traffic cameras. They tracked the waitress who had ruined their kidnapping plot. "Lily!" Chloe screamed, pure terror seizing her as she scrambled toward the burning building. Her sick sister had been home. "Lily!" Before she could take 3 steps, a massive hand clamped down on her shoulder, yanking her backward into the shadows of the alley. She screamed, fighting wildly, but a second set of hands grabbed her wrists, pinning them. "Stop fighting! Look at me!" Chloe blinked through the smoke and ash raining down. It was Silvio, the hulking man from the diner. "My sister is in there," she sobbed, clawing at him. "Let me go." "Your sister is safe," a cold voice said from the darkness. Vincent Moretti stepped out from the shadows of a black town car. His eyes were hard, calculating. "My men pulled her out an hour ago when we intercepted the chatter about the hit. She's currently en route to a private, secure medical facility. Best doctors in the state." Chloe froze, her chest heaving as she stared at the burning wreckage of her life, and then at the mob boss standing before her. You knew they were coming?" "They wanted to send me a message," Vincent said flatly. "You embarrassed the Calabrese family. Now your face is on a hit list. If you walk out onto that street, you will be dead before sunset." "This is your fault," Chloe yelled, tears streaming down her soot-stained face. "I had nothing to do with this." "I know," Vincent replied smoothly, stepping closer. He didn't flinch at her anger. "Which is why I am taking responsibility for you. Get in the car." "I am not going anywhere with the Mafia." Vincent closed the distance between them. He leaned down, his face inches from hers. "You have no home, Chloe. You have no money. Your sister's life depends on machines that I am currently paying for. You saved my son. In my world, a debt of blood is absolute. I am bringing you into my home to protect you, and you are going to let me." With no other choice, Chloe was shoved into the back of the town car. An hour later, they passed through massive wrought-iron gates into a sprawling, heavily guarded compound in Lake Forest. Armed men patrolled the perimeter with Dobermans. It was a fortress, a gilded cage. Inside the sprawling mansion, the scent of expensive scotch and wood smoke filled the air. Vincent led her into a massive oak-paneled study and closed the heavy double doors. "You will live in the East Wing," Vincent dictated, pouring himself a drink. "You will not leave the grounds without my permission. To the outside world, you are Leo's new private tutor." He hasn't spoken a word since that night in the alley, except to ask for you. "I am a waitress, not a nanny." Chloe crossed her arms, shivering in her ruined clothes. "How long am I supposed to stay here?" Vincent turned around, the crystal glass in his hand, catching the firelight. He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch, an undeniable, dangerous chemistry crackling between them. "Until the men who tried to kill you are in the ground," Vincent promised, his voice a dark, velvet threat. "Welcome to the family, Chloe." Life inside the Moretti estate was a jarring contradiction of absolute luxury and paralyzing fear. Chloe's days were spent in the sun-drenched library with Leo. The boy, who had been a silent shell of himself, slowly began to thaw. They spent hours reading together, and for the first time in years, Leo began to laugh, a sound that seemed to haunt the cold, marble hallways of the mansion. Vincent, however, remained a shadow. Chloe would see him in the dead of night, pacing the gardens with a cigarette, or hear his low, gravelly voice behind the mahogany doors of his study, barking orders that shifted the balance of power in the city. One evening, 3 weeks into her protection, Chloe was heading to the kitchen for a glass of water when she passed the library. The door was ajar. Inside, she saw Vincent sitting on the floor, surrounded by Leo's toy soldiers. He wasn't the ruthless Don in that moment. He was just a man trying to figure out how to be a father while his world was on fire. "He's getting better," Chloe said softly, leaning against the doorframe. Vincent looked up, his sharp features softening for a fraction of a second. "He asked for you tonight. He wanted to know if you were staying forever." Chloe stepped into the room, her heart doing a strange, traitorous flutter. "And what did you tell him?" Vincent stood up, moving with the grace of a wolf. He stopped just inches from her, the scent of expensive sandalwood and danger enveloping her. "I told him that in this house, we keep what is precious to us." He reached out, his thumb grazing her jawline. The tension was suffocating, a mix of forbidden attraction and the reality of who he was. "You're not just a waitress anymore, Chloe. You've become the heartbeat of this house." Before she could respond, the heavy front doors of the mansion burst open. Silvio rushed in, his face pale. "Boss, we have a problem. The shipment at Pier 42 was hit. They knew exactly which containers were ours. We have a rat." Vincent's eyes turned to ice. The tender father vanished, replaced by the man who had built an empire on bone and blood. "Lock the estate down. No one goes in or out. If there's a traitor, I'll find them before dawn." The next 48 hours were a blur of interrogation and paranoia. Chloe felt the shift in the house. The guards were twitchy, and Vincent was a ghost. On the second night, while Vincent was at the docks, Chloe noticed something strange. She saw Arthur, Vincent's most trusted advisor, and a man who had served the family for 30 years, slipping into the back gardens near the service entrance. Driven by a gut feeling, Chloe followed him. She stayed in the shadows of the tall hedges, her heart hammering against her ribs. Arthur was standing by the stone fountain, speaking into a burner phone. "The girl is the key," Arthur hissed into the receiver. "Vincent is distracted by her. He's soft. Tomorrow, when he takes her to see her sister at the clinic. That's when you strike. Kill them both. I'll ensure the gate guards are positioned at the south entrance instead." Chloe gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. A twig snapped under her foot. Arthur spun around, his eyes landing on her. The kindly old man facade shattered, revealing a cold, calculating killer. "You should have stayed in the diner, Chloe." He lunged for her, but Chloe was faster. She didn't run for the house, she ran for the garage. She knew Vincent's car had a panic button synced to his personal phone. She scrambled inside a black SUV, slamming the lock just as Arthur pounded on the glass with the butt of a pistol. She hit the alarm, the sirens wailing through the estate. Within seconds, the courtyard was swarming with guards. Arthur tried to flee, but Silvio tackled him to the ground. When Vincent arrived 10 minutes later, the air felt like a thunderstorm was about to break. He walked straight to Arthur, who was pinned against the stone wall. 30 years, Vincent whispered, his voice terrifyingly calm. "I treated you like a father." "The Moretti line is weak," Arthur spat. "You let a waitress into our sanctum. You're compromised, Vincent." Vincent didn't blink. He turned to Silvio. "Take him to the basement. I'll deal with him myself." Then he turned to Chloe. She was shaking, leaning against the SUV. He didn't say a word. He simply pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could feel the frantic thrum of his heart. The betrayal of Arthur was the final straw. The Calabresi family was emboldened, thinking the Moretti empire was crumbling from within. They moved their forces to the outskirts of the city, preparing for a full-scale assault on the Lake Forest estate. But Vincent Moretti didn't play defense. "They think I'm hiding," Vincent said, looking at a map of the city laid out in his study. Chloe stood beside him. She had refused to hide in the panic room. "They think I'm scared because of you and Leo. They're right. I've never had so much to lose." He looked at Chloe, his gaze intense. "I need you to do something dangerous. I need you to be the bait." The plan was a masterclass in deception. Vincent leaked information through a captured Calabresi spy that he was moving Chloe and Leo to a safe house in the old meatpacking district. The convoy moved at midnight. 3 black SUVs sped through the deserted streets. Suddenly, a garbage truck swung out, T-boning the lead vehicle. Men in masks swarmed out of the shadows, guns blazing. They shredded the middle SUV, the one they believed held the waitress and the boy. The leader of the Calabresi hit squad, a man named Dominic, stepped forward, laughing as he approached the smoking wreckage. He ripped open the back door, expecting to find bodies. Instead, he found a pile of bricks and a speaker playing a recording of Leo's laughter. "Looking for someone?" Dominic looked up. Vincent Moretti was standing on the roof of the warehouse above, silhouetted against the moon. Beside him stood his elite marksman. "You fell for a waitress's trick, Dominic," Vincent yelled down. In a spray of gunfire, the Calabresi threat was neutralized in minutes. It wasn't a battle. It was an execution. Back at the estate, Chloe waited in the library, holding a sleeping Leo in her lap. When the doors finally opened, Vincent walked in. He was covered in soot, his suit jacket gone, his shirt sleeves rolled up. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were clear. He walked over to Chloe and knelt at her feet. "It's over," he said. "The Calabresi family is gone. Arthur is gone. You're safe. You can go back to your life now. I've set up a trust for your sister. You'll never have to work a double shift again." Chloe looked around the room, the books they'd read, the boy sleeping in her arms, and the man who had moved heaven and earth to protect her. "What if I don't want to go back?" she asked softly. Vincent reached up, cupping her face. "This world is violent, Chloe. It's loud and it's dangerous. You deserve peace." "I spent my whole life in peace and I was miserable," Chloe whispered, leaning into his touch. "I was alone. I'd rather be in the storm with you." Vincent leaned in, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that tasted of salt, smoke, and a new beginning. The waitress from the 2 a.m. shift had found more than a paycheck. She had found a throne. Chloe started the night as a waitress with nothing but a mountain of debt, but by answering that one call, she changed the fate of an empire. Love can be found in the darkest alleys, and justice always finds a way to those who deserve it. If you enjoyed this story of karma, romance, and high-stakes drama, don't forget to like this video and comment your favorite twist below. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next real-life storytelling episode.